Story 1. Return when found. The first time Arrow left was most definitely on a Friday. That much I know. I do remember looking down at the star-told woods in the distance, a figure flickering through them. There was no figure, of course. It was just there in the same sense that he was. An obscene, fragile absence on a cluttered background. Who was he to me by this point? Well, he was probably something I should have been more afraid of. But then he was an enigmatic force of familiarity with this undidactic, uncanny fire that made my transparency feel acceptable. I hope this is what it was. All you really need to know is what he became. What's that? I guess a calling card, or an ever-incomplete story doubling back on itself, creating a future that narrates the past. You know, I don't really feel that way now, but my fixation on him was something comparatively brazen and alluring. I hardly noticed when he first came to me. He was still only partially real, a construct wearing a name and a face. Untethered to my psyche, I wish this was how I remembered him, as a human artifact of compression. This is the ideal form for all people, I think. He entered with an understated silence and sat just off to the side of me, playfully pointing his perception at the words I wasn't singing. I was playing everything too. Nothing by Manchester Orchestra. I wasn't supposed to be there, you see. This is why I think I wrote my own undoing. Because, you weren't singing some words, yes and no, precisely. What? Don't concern yourself with that. The answer wouldn't be satisfying or nearly as arbitrary as you hope. Okay, the song murmured through the grit-caked convictions of the strings, a voice from the past singing the words. You mean everything to nothing. That's right, you mean everything to nobody to me. You might wonder how someone could simultaneously exist as a state of value and a critical measurement of it. I suppose I once did without realizing it, and the manner that it was immense, but only briefly noticeable. But when I looked into Arrow's sprawling blue eyes, I understood he was not much different from a seizing paradox, except that he was the opposite. Did I ever end up telling you the lake house story? Yes, several times, the one with the Dahmer ex-boyfriend. I, of course, was not dating the actual Jeffrey Dahmer, but that remains to be how I picture him, his character, definition, imprisoned behind aviator glasses. Yeah. Sorry. Why did you send me that message? Did you think I wanted to hear your voice? What? No, I guess metaphorically it was an attempt to preserve a moment happening somewhere in my mind. But I was very drunk. I met Chris Angel's cousin that night, you know. I know that I was drunk or that I met Chris Angel's cousin. I don't remember. If it weren't for my commentary, you'd be nothing, just an ever-shifting presence in the form of a shadow. I sure wish I was nothing, the type of person who says that doesn't usually believe in superstition. Normally, they would believe in something like true love, that fucking penny. My focus somehow drifted from the penny. It was simply the copper-colored approximation of his fear, which I was used to. But the rather shy, smudged Scotch tape pressed to the face of the small holiday gift box stood out immediately. It was perplexingly the most ordinary and uncouth thing adorning it, fingerprinted and stuck to itself at one end. To this day I am disturbed by things that feel momentously ordinary, as if they only adhere to clean, dry nostalgia. The box was wrapped in holographic green paper, which did not burn very well. and was give in to me under the pretense of an empty hallway with others. At the end, looking away, inside was an instrument of fate, as Arrow believed in practice. Between us there was an understanding that there was a knife in the box. He understood this because of the penny. I understood it because the only thing more palpable to me than his fear was my responsibility in shielding him from it. I then warned, and if it were possible to be a person as a form of residue, I later grasped that this was foolish, along with sentimental destruction. Though I do wonder what would have happened had I catastrophized differently, only you would try to make worrying a reflective state. Well, I still don't know why the letter disappeared the second time, but what scared me most is how it resisted erasure the first time. You were very drunk. That never surprised you, just that once, I guess so. I still think it was winter in an analogous sort of way. The roads were not snowy, but untouched in the same way. How could you remember that? I was there. I'm surprised. Tonight I am the best I'll ever be. Becca. Use I have a chance to be half of you. The first line used to be tonight. I stress tonight. I must have altered it because I felt the anticipation of being held accountable for loving. Awkward hands. T. A wet grip of sweat. A pigeon wrenching a worm from the ground. The relentless thudding of anticipation turns me stale, unnaturally sweet. Hello crawls up my throat. You nod. T. The next thing I remember was in one of the darker parts of the road. The headlights sprayed a fuzzy stream of light over the grayish pavement and static grass. I remember the roads being covered with snow, all still painfully blank. The roads were not snowy, but untouched in the same way. We were not talking, but I was thinking about lying. I feel split by my own perception, sometimes a particle wave existence for a particle wave being. I suppose I'll summarize the letter here. Dear Judith, I know it has been a long time since I last wrote, and if I know you probably thought I forgot. I did think he forgot. It was one of those times where I had become a hopeless catalyst with idealist motivations once again. But when he compared himself to a Magic 8 ball, it was the world's worst Magic 8 ball. Actually, well, how the hell would I know? I was never sure exactly how a Magic 8 ball could be subjected to such scrutiny, as if to imply one omniscience were of a higher value than another. Shortly after the letters stopped coming, while I was very drunk, I took a pair of scissors to each envelope, eviscerating the notes like I could somehow sever the meaning from the words and stow that away behind my dresser instead. You don't even remember what they said. You'd think that. Boo. No. Actually, it's much worse. Well, I guess it's not much worse than before. Capable people stand in the craters, meeting there to discuss the insides of our chests, us darker disciples. But I am not afraid of what I'll become when water no longer sings like in the wild. It is a civilization, planned obsolescence, first the scathing truth in your voice, now a candid heartbeat, a wee heathered lighthouse. I beg, please save me from the cold. Small children created the world, native only to his breath, but sorrow from his empty lungs would have been enough. When yearning became the beginning and resumed once more our hearts and tragedies' subtle blush, somewhere there was a deviation, a small silvery voice under the cover. Underneath was the story of the world that spoke desirable lies and ruined me. Becoming you, blame poisons the present, rewrites our first times together and calls us new. I can't escape my life being someone, but our plan to find you there in the craters, softly speaking, and close the loop before time has elapsed and it starts once again. With us, and the sky no longer blue, I though, out of that last line when I was on a walk in the woods, my thoughts took a wind-like shape, dispersing the leaves in a flurry of inconsequential truth. Story 2. I saw it on the news, mortified me to my core. I think the last time I saw her was just 3 weeks prior. My God, if I'd had known. We met at the Dairy Queen we used to lunch at back in middle school. I must have waited in the parking lot in the cold about an hour past the time she said she'd show. She arrived in a taxicab. She didn't look good. I'd heard she had her license taken away months prior and got around in cabs. She gave me a big hug, a desperate hug, like she hadn't been hugged in a while. She smelled of cigarettes. She had her same smile, that same smile I remember from back then, back in middle school. I smelled the alcohol on her smile. We ordered vanilla ice cream sundaes with hazelnut, chocolate syrup, Mandams, and red cherries, like we used to back in middle school. We sat at a booth in the back. She asked me how things were. Great, can't complain, she smiled. Her smile was the same, but everything else had changed. With red, the burdens of life weighing down her face, she wasn't the same, and never would be again, but still had that same smile. She'd been laughing a lot, at first all drunk and childlike, like a happy lit playgirl without a care in this world. I asked about her, how she was doing, what she'd been up to. I'd taken a few bites of my sundae. She hadn't touched hers. She sat there staring at her ice cream bowl in a sad state of confusion, stupefied, as though I'd brought up some great tragedy she'd been doing her best to bury in her mind. Nothing, she said. Oh, double quotes. I haven't been up to anything. She laughed a short, painful titter. The past month has been hell. I'm sorry to hear that. She let her ice cream melt. It's been just awful. She laughed. I can't even believe I'm still standing. What happened? She went on for a long while, rambling, ranting, venting each and every one of her problems. All she'd encountered and been demoralized by. She went on and on for nearly 30 minutes. I felt like telling her to arrive to some sort of point, but I kept my mouth shut. I felt so embarrassed. She went on and on about her work, her boss, his predation, her recent firing, and her eviction. She'd been homeless several weeks, sleeping on park benches in the cold of the winter, but she wasn't homeless anymore. She'd begun crying about halfway through her tirade and wouldn't stop for nearly 10 minutes. I hate to admit it, but I'd never been more embarrassed in my life. I'd taken her hand, and I could feel all the eyes in the bright cream-shaded restaurant. Tan old woman, her grandkids, a young couple, and that girl behind the counter, watching Madeline ramble on, head on, babbling and blubbering sobbing like a baby who'd bottled up the sadness for decades. It's just been so awful. Madeline, I held her hand across the table, Sunday's castassy. She wiped her tears and took a couple deep breaths, got her grip, and apologized. You don't have to apologize, I said. She was all red in the face, wiping her tears with the brown napkins from the tin tissue box on the table, and she laughed looked at me and smiled a desperate smile that knew no joy. Oh, Susie, I think it's so wonderful that we've remained friends all this time. Me too, I said. Do you remember when we first became friends? Do you? Of course I do, but I want to see if you remember. 6th grade, if I'm not mistaken, M.R. Rockwell's class, she said, smiling, nodding her head. I let go of her hand. Yeah, I remember. I hadn't thought about that man in many years, for good reason. He was a rotten old man, and I didn't like him at all. Ma. Dee smiled. I remember he let us pick partners, and I don't think either of us knew anybody in that class. Nope, I smile. So I came up to you and asked you if you wanted to be my painting partner. I smiled and took a bite of what was left of my ice cream. Maddie still hadn't touched hers. She shook her head. That goddamn rotten Mr. Rockwell. Rotten? I thought you liked Mr. Rockwell. He was a scumbag. You used to spend a lot of time alone with him. I remember. She didn't say anything. I remembered the egregious amounts of time she'd spend with that man, at lunch, after school, at night at his home to review class materials. None of the teachers seemed to care, neither did her parents. You remember the time he took us both out for lunch? She asked. He'd I had. Didn't he take us here to this Dairy Queen? Yes, he did. This was the place. She shook her head. Her jaw was tight. That goddamn bastard. Somebody ought to run him over with a semi-truck or throw his ass in a wood chipper. No one deserves that, I said. A bullet to the back of the head, at the very least, I done. T think he ever did anything that bad, I said. Her face contorted in such a strange manner that it gave me an instant sensation of melancholic empathy that made me feel so utterly bad for her, and I wanted to hug her and cry with her. It was all such a strange night. I remember the ice cream I ate that day. Maddie said, on my way to the school's cafeteria, lunch money in hand. Maddie had stopped me and said, "Hey, come with me to Dairy Queen." What? I asked. Dairy Queen. Mr. Rockwell's gonna take us to Dairy Queen. He stood there impatiently behind her, a hard man to look at. She turned to him. "Oh, Mr. Rockwell, please. Can Susie come with us, please, please, please?" "Okay, fine," he said, all annoyed, glaring at me. Maddie smiled. I sat in the back and she sat in the passenger seat of his Oldsmobile, and he took us to Dairy Queen a mile up the road. I ate my ice cream in silence. I could feel Mr. Rockwell's scowl. I didn't want to look up at him, but I could feel him staring, bitter, like I'd done something wrong or deeply offensive. Maddie babbled on, the only one talking. We were the only ones in the restaurant except the counter girl. Maddie rambled on and on. I can't remember what about, but the way he was glaring at me I can still picture now. That crabby old man looked like he could kill me right then and there for reasons I could not and did not want to understand. There was something rather peculiar about the man I couldn't pinpoint. We were leaving. Maddie skipped out the door to the car. Mr. Rockwell said, "Hey," and took me aside. Got eye in my face. The next time Maddie asks you to come along, you tell her you can't. Do you understand me? What? I said. He repeated himself. I trembled. You tell Mad. You don't feel like coming next time? You got it. I nodded. I was so scared I couldn't speak. Your ice cream cost me $75. and I want that money on my desk tomorrow." "You got it," I nodded. "If you don't pay me back, you'll be in very big trouble. Do you understand me?" I nodded. He got out of my face. I wasn't sure if I should follow him to the car. I'd really never been more scared of an adult in my life. Adults were scary back then, but there was something particularly scary about Mr. Rockwell that lingered a long time in the darkest recesses of my mind. Something in his eyes. I'd thought Mr. Rockwell was gonna do something bad to me, and back then, I didn't think any of the other adults would care if Mr. Rockwell had done something bad to me. Adults were scary. Maddie had come to my house during the summer, about 3 weeks before 7th grade would begin. We were sitting in my living room. It was night. Maddie didn't want to go back home, wouldn't specify why. We went outside and sat out on the porch in the dark cool of the evening, and we talked about different stuff. All sorts of different stuff. She would talk about anything once you got her going, but about Phoebe. A minute after we sat down to talk, this speeding Cadillac came barreling at me up the driveway, and the hulking monster, Maddie's father, leapt out and rushed over and grabbed Maddie and dragged her along like a doll as she put up a struggle and cried as he threw her in the back seat of the car. Her father hadn't acknowledged I was there. Maddie was so embarrassed. She cried like an infant. Then her father sped away, and I sat there mortified. I stayed up all night, scared her father would come back. He didn't. I drove her home at night after the date. She insisted we stop at a bar for a drink. I didn't want a drink, but I took her to Eddie's down on Monroe and Main Street, in a part of town I hadn't been in many years. She knocked back a cool 11 shots and many beers. Then we left. She was drunk. She left all frivolous, staggering to the car like a happy little girl without a care in this world. Then she slipped on the ice on the sidewalk in the snow, and I tried to catch her, but she fell fast and hard and really hurt her back. I helped her up and into the car. She cried, but tried not to show it. And all along the way, here she was moaning and writhing to the point where I figured she needed to go to the hospital. She refused, said, "I don't have the money for a hospital visit. I'll pay for it." "No, thank you, Susie. You know you're an angel." "Right," I nearly cried. I took her home. She lived in a rooming house down in the ghetto. Groups of men drinking paper bags, smoking woods, stood out on the front stop. She sat in my car a long while. We were parked on the street. I was nervous. "I'm so glad that we're still friends after all this time." "Me too, Maddie. You're such a good friend." "You as well. And we'll always be friends, no matter what happens. I know, Maddie, I know." Then she left. I drove home. I didn't hear from her for several days after. I thought about her a lot, though I was wary over starting a friendship over again with her. I wasn't sure. When she'd first called me, I was surprised to hear from her. I didn't think I'd ever see her again. I hadn't seen her since maybe 10th grade. She drank a lot back then, 15 years ago. She used to bring bourbon bottles in her book bag to class. I had a dream about her last night. Had been in a gloomy meadow at night after the rain, and she was wet and shivering, and her clothes were all viciously ripped up, and she was looking at me, but I wasn't there. She cried like she had At day on the front porch in her father's car, and she shrieked at me and told me that I didn't understand. I didn't understand. I woke up terrified and lay there a moment. Didn't know why I was scared. Thought about her. Thought of calling. Left my room, turned the TV on, sat in the living room while the coffee brewed. Filled a mug and put some milk in it with sugar. Went back to the living room, watched the news, dropped the mug on the carpet, spilling coffee on my slippers, and backed away from the TV with my mouth gaped. Weeping, I must have wept in horror for several hours, maybe more. I didn't know what to do. I was shaking all over like a nightmare had kidnapped me. I left the TV on, and the broadcaster went on about what happened and what was happening and what the police were gonna do. I sat crying. Oh, Maddie, she was dead. She'd shot herself in Rockwell's home, in his living room, many days after I'd seen her. She'd bought the gun about a year ago. Took a cab to Rockwell's home. He wasn't teaching anymore. He'd been very sick, cared for by his wife, and his home, secluded in a modest suburb on the edge of town, an unkempt lawn, and no home security. Mrs. Rockwell answered the door. Maddie shot her. She kept Rockwell alive in his chair for several minutes and did things to the bastard that didn't make sense. And she shot him in the head, shot herself, and there they lay, and less than 90 seconds later a swarm of police stormed the scene, along with forensics, paramedics, and news reporters with their cameras. One of the cameramen entered the home after the bodies had been taken to the coroner's office. Captured scenes of the blood-splattered bright cherry on the carpet, the welcome mat, and Rockwell's rocking chair in the living room. I saw it on the news. Story 3, virtuous. I'll always remember what they told me. Patience is a virtue. I heard that phrase 1,000 times as a kid. 1,000 more growing up. I've heard it enough throughout my life that I could parrot it in my sleep. But what they failed to tell me was patience breeds complacency, and complacency makes you accommodating. I tried setting boundaries at first. I did. That first week, I even tried to confront them about that smell. Agonizingly sweet, like overripe pears muddled with overturned earth. I swore it followed me, clung to me even, like a ghost. Yet I stood outside that unfortunate, frigid door and knocked. The silence that followed was thick, expectant, heavy enough to make my teeth ache. I only got an answer, less with words and more with a feeling that pressed against my skull like icy fingers. I understood well enough. Boundaries were only a fantasy they'd allowed me for a while. They made it clear that they had needs, unique, specific ones: freshness, portion, temperature. It's hard to predict what they'll want on any given day. It makes grocery runs like grueling marathons. Of course, it took time to learn those preferences, trial and error, mostly error to start. I like to think I've gotten better by now. They weren't always as patient with my mistakes as I was patient with their demands, but there's only so much you can do about a picky eater. They've been here longer than I have, a veteran of the space. So I felt it rude to confront them about their preferences, though they keep odd hours. Naturally, I've adjusted my schedule accordingly. Why bother asking them to accommodate me when I already know they can? I don't sleep much. The sounds in the night were jarring at first, but now just part of the night. White noise, almost. It did take a bit of time to get used to, but who hasn't? Tea dealt with a noisy neighbor or two. Normal routines are something I find myself missing in passing. 8 hours of sleep, coffee in the morning, gym on Tuesdays. Dinner with friends. I can't remember the last time someone called to check on me, or maybe they did and I didn't answer. The phone stays off now anyways. Easier that way, I guess. Although sometimes I try to recall my mother's face, I can. Not now. Anyways, I have a new schedule now, in a way. The parameters they set for me at the times they've chosen. I've already learned well not to deviate from the task given to me or question it. Occasionally, though, I allow myself a moment to wonder what would have been different if I'd refused the first few times. If I'd said no and stood for the boundaries I set, it as too late now. I was patient then, but now I was cooperative. Tonight would be another showcase of that cooperation. I can feel them in that doorway behind me, watching, waiting, but I don't look any more. I know better. They don't need to remind me. They haven't for some time now. I remember. I always remember now. It's all methodical, like artisan craftwork, the trunk, the row, ute, the timing, all memorized, second nature. I know which streets stay quiet after dark, which ones have blind spots. My hands stay steady as I work. They used to shake, I remember that, for what it's worth, that first time, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went pale. Now there's just efficiency. The third time I got it wrong. Wrong temperature, I think, or maybe wrong timing. It doesn't matter now, but then it mattered. They didn't eat for 3 days. 3 days of the house getting colder. 3 days of the walls pressing in more and more, breathing deeper and heavier with every moment. And that sound. Not quite screaming, yet not quite anything. It came from that room relentlessly. I couldn't leave. I couldn't call for help. Who would I call? Who would I turn to? On the 4th day they forgave me. I felt that forgiveness like a fever breaking, and I was careful to never make that mistake again. Now I have the criteria, the timing, the complacency, the practice they need to be alone, isolated. I've gotten good at spotting the patterns, late shifts, headphones, the shortcuts through empty lots. I tell myself I'm just assisting, only aiding in something that would happen, regardless, staying prepared and being helpful. But I can't lie, that trunk is opened before I've even made the decision. That's my memory now. I've timed it perfectly as I should. The park at this hour is always barren. It's only as I pull into the lot that my reflection catches in the rearview mirror, my face illuminated by those dull street lamps. That's still mine. My eyes are still mine. But something behind them isn't. Or maybe it is. Maybe only when the light catches just right. But that's normal, isn't it? People change. It doesn't take long now. Muscle memory, routine, whatever it is, I don't focus on the details. That same sweet trot scent settles into the lining of my car. The headley of fermentation and soil. I buy air fresheners by the case, vanilla, lavender, pine. It doesn't matter. The smell always finds its way through. I catch myself not even noticing it at all, and that's worse somehow, I think, no matter what. That trunk lid always closes with a soft click, and the drive home is always filled with that same terrible silence. I've never opened it after that click, not once, not even in the beginning. I don't need to. When I return home, return that trunk to that wretched room, I know they're satisfied. I can feel it in the way the house settles, the way the cold recedes back into the walls. I'm tired, but it's earned the kind of tired that comes from a job well done. I'm beyond the days of fighting it I used to, before I couldn't tell which thoughts were mine and which weren't. I can still remember that feeling just barely now. Distant, only a memory. It holds no meaning anymore. This is what I am now, or maybe what I've always been, just on the cusp of being. I realize now that they've been patient with me too, in their own way, teaching me, guiding me. They taught me better, taught me my place, and I should thank them for it. I'll always remember what they told me. Patience is a virtue. Story 4. The Lake. I've lived here for as long as I can remember. Since the dawn of my memories, I have watched the snow fall every winter, covering the vast eastern scapes with a thick layer of snow that would glitter in the sunlight on days God made the sky blue, the ice melting away in the summer to reveal swaying grasses that would dance gracefully too. The whispers of the crisp breeze. Mother would send me out every morning to the church with Father Philomene, and I would line up with all the oath. Our boys from the town at the entrance of the teaching rooms, our noses red and feelingless in the biting cold. We weren't allowed to play with the girls. Father Philomene would never allow us to. Forget it. It was immoral to grant our attention to anyone other than our wife, he would say, but on some days, Oliver and I would sneak out behind the barren courtyard to the rocks behind the church tee, meet with Paulina and her friends to play jump rope and hopscotch together until we heard one of the sisters' footsteps slapping on the floor beneath the beams that lead out to our secret place. Eve. Every Sunday, Mother took us all to Mass, and we would listen to Father Philomene talk to us about a new passage from the Bible. He would often repeat the same ones. Mother said it was because they are important, but Father would say it was because he was senile and old. I didn't know what senile meant, but it didn't sound nice, which didn't seem fitting for Father Philomene. He was a very nice man. However, the end of his wooden ruler when we couldn't sit still was not. Withhold not correction from the child. For if thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die, thou shalt. It beat him with the rod, and shall deliver his soul from hell. He would say, peering at us through his foggy-rimmed spectacles, sitting behind our wooden desks, which smelled of age and rot, sitting in the humid air of freezing winters. After the Mass, Mother would allow me to go play with Oliver in the town. We would run in the playground and go out as far as the fields near the lake end. The valley, tall fronds that would brush past my bare legs in the summer when I wore shorts and bury my leather boots in the snow in the winter. But one thing that Mother always reminded me not to do was to not go to the lake far out beyond the fields. Do not go down to the lake, Theodore, lest you wish to fall in by, and I did not want to fall in, so I did not go. Faith. Our Philomene said the same to us at the end of every day. Boys, remember to not go down to the lake, lest Satan catch you and drag you to the depths. Sister Octavia and Sister Henrietta would say the same as we left the church, as would Mr. Morris from the green shop in the square. Mr. Morris always had a warm smile on his face and rosy cheeks beneath his gray beard. But when he would remind me, not go down to the lake, a strange sort of shadow would be cast upon his visage, and I knew that Mr. Morris was wise, so I did not go. It was in the winter of my 13th year that one day, after what had seemed like an eternal succession of hours, listening to Father Philomene talk about the martyrdom of St. Peter, that I headed out with Oliver to the fields, Paulina and Beatrice behind us. We had slipped out the back of the church from our secret place and ran straight down from the streets that wound out to the left of the town square. As Oliver ran breathlessly into the fields, he stopped to stare out into the expanse, a strange wildness in his chestnut brown eyes I hadn't seen before. As he swept away his blonde locks, he turned his rosy cheeks to us. "Why don't we go a bit further today?" A mischievous grin creeping up his face. "I don't know." I began to hesitate before the girls cut me off. "Yes, let us go. Come on, T. Theodore, it won't harm us." Paulina ran after Oliver, her brown wild hair swaying across her back as she ran and forcing me right behind them as we trudged through, the snow crunching beneath our boots. When Oliver had said, "A little further," I didn't think he would go past the old pine that stuck out of the ground in all seasons, but he kept running, his breath rasping and catching in his throat as he pushed forward towards the lake. "Oliver, stop," I cried out, but it was without success. He kept running, and girls behind him. Beatrice whipped her head around to shout, "Come on, Theodore," and before I was aware of what I had done, my boots were buried in the snow at the shore of the lake. A thick layer of glassy ice glazing over the black extent of murky water was all I could see. "Ole, let's go back," I rasped. "No, I want to try to walk on the ice," he chirped, taking his first step onto the ice. A blind panic washed over me as I remembered all those things that Father Philomene had said about the lake, and I followed after Oliver, making countless failed attempts at grasping his wrist and flailing in the air as I slipped. But Oliver seemed strangely steady. I kept sliding across the inky verglas, my heart pounding in my throat and my fingers red and swollen from the biting cold, until I wasn't just a couple steps in. I had followed the bow over 100 feet in. I reached for his gloved hand again. I dropped onto my knees, my hands slipping across the ice and bile creeping into my mouth, waiting to hear the unmistakable cracking below me. But I did not hear it. As a wave of relief washed over me, I opened my eyes again to meet the dark abyss underneath my body. And I stared into the black below and saw something. I squinted hard to make it out, but just after I had stared long enough, I wished that I hadn't, as my heart sank down to the pit of my stomach. Glassy and blank eyes stared up at me, dozens and hundreds, their pupils frozen wide, as if their last sight had been the embodiment of terror itself. Wrinkled hands faced up at me, their palms up open to the sky as if in a silent and pointless prayer. Our ghost white lips hung slightly parted, as though trapped in an eternal scream, not a single breath escaping them. A raw, desperate cry ripped out of my gut before I could realize I was screaming in horror as I slid backward, and I locked eyes with one of them, and for the split second that I met their eyes, I could have sworn their pupils moved. "Oliver, Oliver, come back. We must go." I choke on my own words, grasping for a way to stand. Look, as Oliver's eyes drifted down slowly, as if his mind couldn't comprehend the sight it had laid eyes on when the boyish color vanished from the skin. Beneath us, rolling out in every direction, lay a graveyard of the bodies trapped beneath the lake. None of them were identical. Each horrified face carried its own story, but each one was just as pale and expressionless as the next. But they weren't floating freely. They were tied down, tethered by slick gray roots that grew out of their backs, pulling them towards the vast abyss below, his face painted with horror as he slipped and fell face flat onto the ice, meeting the cold gaze of one of the bodies as tears began to form in his eyes and a sob racked his small frame. No, it's not possible. He laid his hand on the ice, and I shifted across the surface after him, denying what sight my eyes had just met. The blank gaze of Father Philemon read up at me, his rimmed spectacles placed perfectly on his face. Story 5, The Longhouse of Shadows. The smoke curled thick above the rafters of the longhouse, mingling with the scent of roasted meats and tea-mead. The fire pit blazed at the center, its light flickering across carved beams that seemed to twist in the shadows. Tonight the hall was alive with voices that carried both awe and dread, for they spoke of my father. I sat among the Norse gathered, though my heart was heavy and my tongue silent. My father had not fallen to Saxon steel, nor to a storm or sickness. He had been claimed by something far older, far darker, a Draugr, the restless dead that haunt the barrows. The bard, our skull, rose, his voice commanding silence. He began to weave tales of my father's deeds, how he had once led us through frozen seas, how he had stood against raiders with nothing but his axe, how his laughter had carried through storms. Yet each tale was tinged with unease, for all knew how he had died. Everyone within the longhouse drank deeply, but their boasting was subdued. My uncle leaned close, his scarred face grim. Your father was saint. Wrong, he whispered, but strength means little against the dead. The Draugr cannot be slain as men can. My other uncle slammed his mead horn down upon the table. Oh, his voice shook, thick with emotion. He looked right at me, his eyes fierce, sad, and scared all at the same time. I saw it, he said. Its eyes glowed like embers. Its flesh blackened, its stench of how your father struck it down once, twice, thrice, but it rose again. Laughing, the hall grew colder, the fire sputtered, though no wind stirred. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, stretching across the walls like discs that wanted to grab you. A woman screamed, her drinking horn cracking in her grasp, spilling blood-red wine across her lap. The skald's harp snapped a string, the sound as sharp as bow, any breaking. My mother's voice cut through the murmurs. He was more than a warrior, she said firmly. He was a husband, a father, and now he walks with the gods, not with the cursed dead. But even she could not banish the chill that crept through the hall. The rafters groaned as though under an unseen weight. Looking up, I thought I saw from the shadows above eyes faint, glowing, watching. I felt the eyes of my fellow Norse upon me. Some looked with expectation, others with pity. My throat tightened, but I forced words past it. My father taught me that courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. I will not forget, nor will I ever forget him. All in the hall roared their approval, fists pounding, horns raised, yet beneath the nose I heard something else, a low guttural laugh, echoing from nowhere and everywhere. I see it still when I close my eyes. We had gone to raid a Saxon village, but the night before we camped near an ancient burial mound. My father warned us not to disturb it, but some men laughed, saying the dead were long gone. At midnight the ground split. From the mound rose a figure, tall and twisted, its skin gray as ash, its eyes burning red. A drogger, it came with the strength beyond just one man, tearing shields apart and hurling warriors like children's toes. My father met it, head on, axe flashing. He struck its skull, split its ribs, severed its arm, yet each wound closed, each limb reknit. Back, son, my father roared, shoving me aside. The drogger's claws sunk into his chest, black blood spilling. He fought, even as it tore into him, his axe biting deep, but the creature laughed. A sound like stones grinding in the grave. My father fell, his eyes meeting mine. "Do not weep for me, boy," he whispered, though his voice was already fading. "Carry the flame, and beware the dead." As my father died in my arms, the drogger vanished into the night, leaving only silence and the stench of rot. The next morning, the village gathered by the fjord. The sky black with storm clouds, the sea restless as though it too feared. My father's body lay upon the funeral ship, freshly washed, adorned in the best warrior's clothing specifically made for his voyage to Valhalla. Alive, my father was an imposing figure, but now with his face pale, lying there in the boat, he looked small, almost withered in the shroud he was wrapped in. I placed his axe upon his chest so he would have it with him in the afterlife. As I moved back, I scowled at those who I heard whispering how his axe had failed him against. The drogger, Norse men and women stepped forward one by one, laying gifts and tribute onto the ship. One of my uncles placed a mead horn, uttering, "May you drink in Valhalla and not wander as a drogger." My mother placed a carved figure of Freya, whispering, "May she guard you from the drogger's curse." Torches we relit. I, along with my two uncles, stepped forward. My heart was pounding as each one of us touched our fires to the ship's timbers. The flames caught quickly. Racing along the vessel's frame, the ship began to drift, pushed by the tide, its prow cutting through the waves that were forming from the oncoming winds. Fire was consuming the boat quickly, bright against the ever-darkening storm clouds. My father's body was swallowed by the blaze, his spirit carried upward in smoke. Yet as the ship burned, the unnatural signs returned. The flames hissed as though resisting, turning black at their edges. The wind howled, LED, carrying a voice, guttural, mocking, and in the fire I thought I saw movement, a shadow rising, eyes glowing red. My breath caught, but when I blinked it was gone. The warriors raised their arms and banged their weapons against their shields. Everyone along the water's edge began a chant, voices rising in unison. "Fenrir, Fenrir," their cries echoed across the fjord, across the mountains, across the sky itself. In that moment, I felt him not gone, but watching, whether from Valhalla or from the grave, I could not tell. I raised my axe high, the weight of it grow. "Unting me, I will carry your flame," I whispered. The wind answered, cold and fierce, as though the gods or something darker had heard. That night the longhouse was quiet, the feast was over. The songs had faded, embers glowed, and only the shadows remained. I sat alone, staring into the withering fire. My father's shadow seemed to flicker there, but behind it I thought I saw another, taller, twisted, with eyes like glowing embers. The rafters creaked, the shadows stretched. Somewhere in the dark I heard it again. That laugh, low and grinding, promising that why father's story was not yet ended. I knew then that my path was set. I would fight, I would lead. I would honor Fenrir, my father, but I would also hunt the Draugr it had lend more than a life. It had stolen my family's peace, and when my own time came, I prayed I would not rise from the grave, cursed to walk as the restless dead. Until then, I would live as why father had taught me, bold and yielding with the gods, and the shadows watching. Story 6, rigid. The first symptoms appeared after I started volunteering at the Madsen Public Library. But I didn't immediately make the connection, and by the time I did, well, now I'm getting ahead of myself, and I have a strict policy against spoilers, both giving and receiving. They're untidy, rude, and indicate a lack of discipline. It's better if you earn it. The library is on Main Street, right in the beating heart of town, in a one-story red brick building with a 3-bar bike rack and a black, powder-coated steel and cedar bench erected in loving memory of longtime Mayor Marshall Buxton. It's co-located with the community center and City Hall, which the locals still call the new City Hall to distinguish it from the creepy old City Hall building a few blocks west, even though it was built decades ago. I guess things don't change too quickly in small towns. I'm okay with that. I rode my bike that first date, just like I did back in the city, even though there was a rare early summer rain. It was only a mile or so, and I wasn't going to change the plan, even if it meant spending a few hours in wet shoes. The streets were the same that I had terrorized as a kid, only now I had a carbon fiber road bike instead of a rusty BMX. Also, now I swerved around the puddles instead of targeting them. After locking up my bike and clipping the helmet to my backpack, I entered the building through the heavy, carved wooden doors. Other than a few chairs and a CP-tone head map of Madsen from the early 20th century, the lobby presented me with 3 options. Go right to City Hall, straight down a short hallway with bathrooms to the community center, or left to the library. I opened the library door, the door that led to everything that came next, starting with head librarian Dorothy Frammel, who was quite possibly the most annoying person I ever worked with. Martin, she yelled, breaking the first and most famous rule of libraries in the first moment of our acquaintance. Hillary said you'd be coming in today, right? Teos. She leaned over the counter and extended a fist, displaying knuckles and a forearm embellished with faded tattoos that I recognized in the moment, to just as quickly slipped from my mind. Pound it. I pounded it. Wet. She wiped her hand on her lime overalls. Yeah, sorry, I said. Didn't expect the rain today. You're good, ass. He scanned me as I stripped off my clinging jacket. Did I get that right? Righteous, huh? That's from your time, right? The 1980s? Oh, 20th century. I nodded. Yeah, I guess we said that back then. Hard to remember. I hung my jacket on the coat tree and smoothed it, hung my backpack next to it, straightened the zippers. No doubt, she said, earnest eyes widening. Well, I'm glad you remembered to come in today. I tilted my head. Did she just joke 'cause you're old and forget things? Sorry, my mom says I have social serenity, like the opposite of social anxiety. I just say what I think. Then, in a cartoony cowboy voice, she said, "You'll either get used to it, or you'll just get." Quick transition to serious face, like my dad. Huge smile. Kidding. My dad didn't leave us. Brimming eyes, pouty lip, he died in a freak grain. Elevator accident. Oh, no. Shirt got caught in the auger. At that point, with horror, I realized, oh, Gare, I hardly know I was working with a Gen Z theater kid. No, but seriously was pretty grim. One who was presently caught in a feedback loop, trapped in a riff-off with herself. How long would I go on? How's your dad? She said, and in the sudden silence I heard the ticking of the giant analog clock on the wall over her head. Oh, he's good, getting settled in at Pineville. Age, excellent. My great-grandma lives there. Good food, yeah, I said, taking a deep breath to recover from the gut punch of her great-grandma being in the same assisted living facility with my dad. Just how old was I? She says it's like being back in college. Everyone's a teacher or a nurse or has an MRS degree, and the men get all the attention. Things have changed a lot since then, but not enough. Bet, I said, daring to attempt a Gen Z term I'd heard on social media. I felt exposed, like an escaping prisoner, cringing in the mud, caught in the guard tower floodlights. It stopped her in her tracks. She crinkled her eyes and crossed her arms like she was snuggling into a cozy sweater. Oh, I like you, thanks, come on, whereupon she flung herself onto the counter, wiggled for a comically long time, until her legs had done a 180, and hopped down in front of me. Let me show you around. She spent the next hour walking me through the 1,250 square foot, one-room library, kids section with its low shelves, low tables, low chairs, colorful rug, and a bulletin board filled with cartoon character cutouts, fiction section with subsections for sci-fi, fantasy, mystery, thriller, and romance. Non-fiction section with subsections for biographies, true crime, and cooking, a shelf for graphic novels, and another for books on tape, a spinner dedicated to Agatha Christie. One of our projects this summer will be to break out and give it its own section. Us. Yachts are people, too. She told me how she'd recently been recruited to move from Chicago to Madison to run the library after the longtime librarian passed away. I told her how I'd moved home temporarily to help my dad transition to Pine Village and clean up and sell the house, the former being no small task after living there for more than half a century, and the latter perhaps even harder. In a small town getting smaller, I was fortunate to have a job I could do entirely online on my own hours, and between and organizing the house I had no shortage of work. But something was missing. Someone at Pine Village, a lovely white-haired woman named Grace, mentioned that the library was looking for volunteers. It sparked something in me, a delicious ache, like my belly was cramping but I knew a sumptuous holiday meal was waiting on the table in the dining room. I'd spent many hours in this library as a kid, perusing the shelves, spinning the spinner, laying on the rug on my back, balancing a book in the air above my face, back before the bike rack, when I'd just leave my bike around the corner on a strip of grass. I remember the librarian back then would at times let me stamp the due date on the slip in the book myself. On one very special day, she looked over both shoulders before offering me the choice between black, green, red, or blue ink. Being back in the library felt like the home my condo in the city didn't. Dorothy was walking me through the more modern barcode system used today on the door open, seemingly to nobody. Then a woman backed in, bumping the self-closing door with her powder blue pantsuited rear end. "Oh, dear," she said, bopping the door with her not insubstantial derriere. She made a quick move to escape the door and rotate into the room, then straightened her back and locked her knees. I had a flash of a 1950s stewardess. I almost expected to see one of those funny round hats on her bouncy red hair. She held out a brown pastry box. "Good morning, y'all," she gushed, and the sun shone brighter through the windows behind her. We had some leftover donuts and whatnot after tea. A council meeting last night, so I said to myself, "Margaret L. Fall, you should take those over to the fine folks across the lobby." And anyway, I wanted to sneak a peek at our newest librarian. A little birdie whispered in my ear that you were starting today. She set the pastry box on the counter separating us and slid it forward with two dainty pokes of her index fingers. "Thank you, Margaret," Dorothy said. "I'd never claimed to be the best reader of people, but I noticed that Dorothy, and a breach of theater kid standard protocol, was not matching Margaret's energy. "Dee-dee-do. I'm Martin Serenby. It's nice to meet you," I said, reaching my hand across the counter. "Margaret L. Fall," she said, squeezing my hand. "Executive assistant to the mayor." The scent of baby powder suffused the room. Not a librarian, just a volunteer. She gave me a smile reminiscent of those normally reserved for drawings worthy of posting on the fridge. Just a volunteer, not only a fellow servant of the deserving people of the great town of Matson, but for no pay. Certainly not holding us over a barrel for Chicago-level pay. I flicked my eyes to check in on Dorothy, who'd turned back to the computer. "Well, I'll let you all get back to your busy day." Her eyes traversed the empty library, then settled on mine. Another wink. "It was fantastic to meet you. And do say hello to your father for me. He's a peach. Toodaloo." She tapped the top of the pastry box with one gleaming pink nail, winked, and clucked her tongue, and in a swirl of powdery freshness, she was gone. In the vacuum that was left, I blinked again while I said, "She's a dick." Dorothy jumped in the air, landed with both fists clenched, skier style, then spun in a circle and started wiggling like her skin was full of cats. Then, still, she looked at me and said earnestly, "It is my considered medical opinion that she is addicted to being a dick. That's certainly my verdict. I predict that she always be a dick." Hold on now. That's a ridiculously radical conclusion. Well, I'm sticking to it. At that, we both burst out laughing. We spent the next couple of hours getting to know each other while she trained me on the systems. I asked her what instrument she had played in high school band. Flabbergasted, she said, "What makes you think I was in band and also, theatrically, clarinet?" She asked me what I majored in college, and why was it accounting. Laughing, emboldened, I asked about her tattoos, The change in her physicality was abrupt, sedately, but with a warm smile that was somehow also wise. She said, "Thank you for asking. Ask me again sometime," and the tea was that I ended up eating one of Margaret's day-old pastries. There was one gluten-free apple fritter I couldn't pass up, because how often would I find gluten-free pastries in Madison? But Dorothy just made a cross with her index fingers and refused. That night my allergies decided to make a visit. At the time I blamed the years of accumulated dust in Dad's attic, which I dedicated a couple of hours a day to breathing and bathing in while I sorted objects into keep, donate, trash, and the bane of future me. Maybe it started with prickly eyes and itchy, irritated patches on the tender skin on the inside of my wrists and elbow. TITs, I figured saline drops, and over-the-counter 1% hydrocortisone cream could handle it. I'd preserve the big guns, if necessary, for later. Later arrived the next morning. I woke to discover that the itchy pain had spread to the skin on the sides of my torso, the back of my knees, and, most annoyingly and hardest to reach, and are my shoulder blades. I broke out the tub of betamethasone valerate 0.1% gel, a more potent prescription-only topical corticosteroid. I preferred the gel for larger areas. It was easier to spread and quicker to absorb, and felt for just a moment like a soothing dip in a cool lake, escaping a blazing sun. Maybe if I nipped it in the bud I could prevent a long, uncomfortable flare-up. That day the combined first-grade classes from Madison Elementary, for a special treat during the last week of school, visited the library. I shelved books while Dorothy read Where the Wild Things Are and tramped around growling, "I'll eat you up." I wish you could have seen the wild rumpus of 36 7-year-olds stomping and spinning. Dorothy waved me over. I wiggled my head no, then yes. He started chanting, "Martin, Rumpus, Martin, Rumpus," and soon the kids and both teachers joined in. The mob formed into a Dorothy-led conga line which wended its way around the kids' area and then toward the counter. "Martin, Rumpus, Martin, Rumpus, Martin." Dorothy growled, "Lead us, or we'll eat you up." I was trapped, delightfully, frustratingly, joyfully, embarrassingly trapped. So I joined the wild rumpus. I led the wild rumpus, and, for a moment, the ache of my sores fell away. Dorothy and I are nothing alike. She's a boisterous, tattooed, late-20s, close talker from the Midwest that drops crumbs everywhere, somehow, even when she's not eating. I'm a tidy, quiet, middle-aged, list-making allergy sufferer who keeps his opinions to himself and would rather not eat than try something new. I mentioned earlier that Dorothy was the most annoying person I've ever worked with. That's true. She's also, somehow, one of my favorites. Two things can be true at the same time, right, Tilda? By the time I got home, my skin was screaming for more gel. I stripped down to assess the situation and found it was worse and spreading rapidly. The itchy pinkness had spread in every direction, across my belly, up my neck, and across my inner thighs and buttocks. The places where it had been merely irritated before were now brown and scaly, and when I bent my elbows below 90 degrees, hot electricity zapped up and down my arms. Had it ever been this bad? I pulled out my phone to post a message in my all-urgent patient portal and realized my itchy, swelling eyes weren't focusing on the screen. Blink, blink again. A few drops of saline, nothing helped. Meanwhile, closing my eyelids felt like a stone door scraping shut in a medieval dungeon. Was something in there? I leaned over the vanity in my childhood bathroom, my face inches from the mirror. It was blurry, but I could see. What was that? The whites of my eyes were no longer white. Instead, they were the dirty yellow-brown of topaz. I gasped. What was happening to me, ignoring the tearing pain in my elbow, overriding everything and me telling me to stop? I extended an index finger and gingerly touched my right thigh. It was warm, but unnaturally rough, like a callus, something chitinous coating my I had to get it out. I scraped an experimental fingernail across it. It felt repulsive, but didn't hurt. I could do this. It had texture. I thought I could get a grip on it. My thumb jaw, minus one index finger, and I pinched. Gently, then more. Insistently, something resisted under my eyelids, tugged at the hidden tissues inside my eye socket. My breath came in puffs. I was in it. Now I had to stay strong. See it, though. I pinched harder and found purchase. Ignore the pain. Ignore the suction-y sensation. The translucent coating peeled off in a rigid chunk. Like half an eggshell, I flicked it away, blinked, and stared into my stinging, watering eye. Other than being bloodshot and sensitive to light, it appeared normal. I knew I had to free the third eye, too, before I lost my nerve. But I was so tired. Every movement now felt like I was trying to sprint in a swimming pool. Maybe I should lay down, rest for a few minutes. I could set an alarm. When I held my phone up, I saw that the scaly husk was spreading from my wrist up over the heel of my hand and across my palm. I set the alarm for 15 minutes and shuffled to my bed. I collapsed on my back, letting my arms and legs go straight, and immediately felt relief. This is what my body wanted, to be long and rigid and still. I dragged my tongue over the thickening, gelatinous surface between my cheeks and gums and wondered randomly if they still sold Big League Chew. 15 minutes later, the phone alarm started chiming. 15 minutes after that, it stopped. Approximately tilde. Is my fault a woman? She sounded like she was on the other side of the wall, but I could see, as if through thick, melted glass, her distorted shadow leaning over me. How is it your fault, a man? This was meant for me, the woman again. Dorothy, maybe they know. You know they know. I was exhausted, hazy, but I tried to move and failed. The man sighed. They're getting bolder. They think we won't see it. They don't care if we see it. Then, up close in my ear, as if through a window, Martin, can you hear me? I hope you can. It's Dorothy. I'm so sorry. We're gonna make you better. I swear we will. We just have to figure it out. Things are different in Madsen from when you grew up. P.O. Player taking sides, and you got caught in the crossfire. We need to move him, the man said. They'll be watching. So they moved me, I don't know where, but it's dark and getting darker. Dorothy visits, and others too. I hear them arguing. I hope they figure out how to help me before it's too late, because something feels funny. I think I'm changing. Story 7. A cold winter evening in an attic, snowflakes fell, a new moon enveloped the world in darkness, the snow crunched under my feet. My eyes watered, feet numb, I felt like an ice cube. I lugged my aching body up the driveway, my goal in sight. In the driveway was my dad's semi-truck. He was home, oh crap. My feet numb, my hands shoved in my pockets. I was too damn cold to run. Trembling, I forked my hands to turn the doorknob. Great, it was not locked. Silence, darkness. I removed my tennis shoes and spring jacket. Weak heat barely removed the chill. Dim light came from the dining room. I shook him. Why hands and feet? Pain could no frost bite. I crept down the hall and glanced at the dinner table. It was set for dinner. My dad, mom, brother, and sister sat staring at empty plates, and king glasses, and silverware. Oh crap. I put on my neutral face, stopped the shaking of my body, and entered. It's about time you got here, mocked my father. I passively stared at the orange carpet. You're late. What's your excuse? This time, he grumbled, I missed the bus. Excuses, honey, could you serve dinner? He ordered. My mom pushed herself up from the table. She waddled to the counter and filled a plate heaping with food. She gave it to my father. She served my brother huge portions. She served herself half portions, and my sister barely enough food to feed. An infant, I stood on the heat vent, allowing heated air to go up my pant leg. I sniffed sterile air, the only sound the clicking of silverware. Sue ordered my father, go to your room. She walked past me, giving me the evil eye. What a jerk, sending her to bed early and hungry. Now you clean this mess up. Next time get a rye. My dad shook his head. Yes, I answered in a steady voice. I kept my head down. Silently, they went to the living room. The TV blared Jeopardy music. I heard my dad snoring. Oh, Joe. I drank a glass of milk. I devoured leftovers, licky. NG, the plates clean. I washed the dishes and table as fast as possible. I stole a sandwich and crept upstairs to my bedroom. Sue was huddled on her bed, wrapped in blankets. I handed her the sandwich, hands trembling. She tore the sandwich into small pieces and ate it. We can still get a beating, I whispered. She hiccuped. Jerks, it's freezing in here. I'm sleeping in the attic. Want to join me? I reply. It was safer in the attic. My mother could not climb the ladder. It's too damn cold up there. It's cold here. They closed the heat vents. We can huddle together. Are the attic door locks? Why do they hate us so much? I hate living here. I hate them. I did not have an answer. I collected my sheets, pillow, and blanket. I signaled to Sue to follow me. I tiptoed to the hallway closet and grabbed an armful of blankets, then slowly, cautiously pulled down the attic ladder. Fridge air seeped downward. Like criminals, we slinked up the ladder. We entered the attic. It was a rectangle room with wooden floors and slanted ceiling. There was a musty sofa in front of a window. I pulled up the ladder and locked the door. Safe. I looked at Sue, her blonde hair and long, thin face. She was so skinny. We moved to the sofa, managed not to creak any floorboards. We sat on the sofa and wrapped ourselves in blankets, sharing body heat. I looked out the window. Snowflakes floated in the streetlight. Darkness enveloped the night. This sucks, Sue whispered. I wish we could get out of here. How the cops will stop us. You're 14. I'm 15. Damn the cops. Damn our parents. Damn 'em all. Her body shook like a gale whine. Shoo. I heard someone coming up the stairs. A door opened and shut. Drawers opened and closed. A bed creaked. It came from my brother's room. He was in bed. I heard the stairs groaning for mercy, slow, steady steps, heavy breathing. My mother ascended the stairs. She stopped in front of our bedroom. I held my breath. No, please, no. Go to your own room. The floor creaked. Footsteps entered my parents' room. Door slammed. Drawers opened and closed. Sheets rustled. Bed squeaked, a sigh, then silence. She was in bed. Stay there. My dad would sleep on. The cough. I hugged my sister. I felt her ribs under sagging skin. She was hot. Her clothes sticky, drenched in sweat. What's wrong with you? I whispered. Don't know. Feel horrid, just dizzy. Head hurts. Mom will not let me eat. She coughed. Shoo, they're in bed. I hate them, I know. Okay, I'm getting you an ambulance. How you wait here? I have a plan. What? Just wait. When the ambulance gets here, make sure you're in it. I crept downstairs to the phone. My father snored on the cough. I crossed my fingers, hoping he would stay asleep. I carried the hot pink Prince's phone to the bathroom, locked the door, dialed 0 for operator. Operator, how may I help you? Emergency, need an ambulance. You are located at 100 East Elm Street, Jamestown? Yes. Who's being picked up? My sister Sue. She is very sick, unable to eat, losing weight. An ambulance will be there in 30 minutes. Knock, knock. Who's in there? Demanded my dad. It's just me. Who are you talking to? Why is the phone in there? Open up this door. My dad pounded on the door. Help me, please, I screamed. The door shook. The operator replied, the police have been notified. Open this door now. Crack. The door split. Oh, no, no, no. I dropped the phone. The window. Opened it. Pushed the screen out and crawled through. I feel in a snowdrift. My dad's head poked out the window. You bitch, he glared at me. Hand shaking, I ran. In the street all the houses were dark. I ran to the old nag's house, the elderly woman who hated everything. I slammed into her door screaming, fire, fire, fire. Opened the door, the porch light turned on. Lines call the police, squeaked the old women. Yes, yes, call them, call the police. Fire, fire. A hand grabbed my shoulder. It turned me around. My father, you bitch, shut up. I by. Him, shoved him, ran. Fire, 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 police. Porch lights blinded me. Dogs barked, breathing heavy, hid behind a bush. My dad was talking to the old lady. Where were the cops? The AM. Dewland's house lights turned off, dogs quieted. My dad walked across the street. No help. I walked over to the old lady's house and broke in. She was sitting in her kitchen, eyes wide, hands shaking. She threw a teacup at me. You missed. Where is the phone? She pointed at the phone. I picked up the phone, dialed 0. I handed the phone to her. Now get an ambulance. The cops or the FBI? I demanded, hands shaky, crying. She stepped away from me. Hello, is this the operator? Yes. How can I help you? I called for an ambulance for 100 Elm Street, Jamestown. When will it be here? That call was canceled. Why? It was a prank call. The old woman grabbed the phone. This hoodlum broke into my home. She is barefoot, no jacket and a man chassin'. She her called her a bitch. The old women listened. Yes, police and an ambulance, hurry. She dropped the phone. She backed away from me. The police will arrest you, she hissed. Think why? Ooh. If my sister gets an ambulance, I'll go to jail. We stared at each other, waiting. After an eternity, there was a knock on the door. Police, said a woman's voice. Come and beg the old women to cops carrying guns and handcuffs strutted into the kitchen. The old biddy pointed at me. That hoodlum broke into my house. Arrest her. Where is the ambulance? The cops nodded at each other. A tall black male cop stepped in front of me. Step into the next room, he ordered. I obeyed. He pulled out the handcuffs. Reach for my wrist. I threw a statue of Mary at him. I jumped over a cough and ran out the door. I sprinted across the street to the dark, silent house. Damn it, the door was locked. I broke a pane of glass. Blood dripped from my wrist. I opened the door. The cop chased me. Catch me if you can. I ran up the stairs to the attic. What the hell is going on? Yelled my dad. The cop was right behind me. He entered the attic. See? He approached the sofa. I was holding Sue. She was silent. Her head and arms hung, her chest still. I'm so sorry. Fuck you, you damn cop. Fuck everyone. I lay Sue down onto the urine-soaked, musty sofa. I broke the window, jumped out. I hit my head. My mother screamed. She broke her neck. A female voice mumbled. No pulse, exclaimed a male voice. The other one upstairs looks like a skeleton. This one a suicide. The family is praying to God to forgive their disobedience, daughters, stated a tired male voice. Silence, shades of gray, no pain. Sue tapped my shoulder, smiling. She hugged me. You did it. We escaped.